This is our paper slideshow over child labor during the Industrial Revolution. The occupations that the kids had usually consisted of working in the factories, cotton working, or newspaper making. Over half of the working population in the cotton industry were children that were under the age of 19. For boys, they usually were laborers, servants, or manufacturers, while the girls were servants, manufacturers, or dressmakers. This is a picture of some children working in a cotton industry. The wages and hours, the kids would work long hours in a day, like 12 to 14 hours each day, obviously at a very young age. They would work with large, dangerous equipment that was in the factories, and the factory owners tried to justify themselves, which they obviously could not do. During the Industrial Revolution, there was few government regulations that protected children, or anybody for that matter, in factories. Many children lost fingers, arms, legs. They'd work in the mines from long days. Young girls sometimes would lose their teeth due to chemicals that would be in the ventilations. And treatment, the kids had cruel and unusual punishment. A lot of the times they would be beat or abused by their bosses. There was one punishment in particular called weighted punishment, where, say, if a kid did something they weren't supposed to, their boss would tie a large stone around their neck and they would have to carry it around up and down the aisles of wherever they were working so the other kids would see them and know not to do what they did. The kids also had to go through all other kinds of cruel punishments. Here's a picture of a kid who's obviously hunched over in a mine, and you could imagine what that would do to your back after years of working. Why they use kids? Well, for starters, their size. The kids were obviously small, so they could fit in and out behind machines and whatnot. Actually, 20% of the working population was under the age of 16. The kids were easier to control and manage because obviously they wouldn't argue about anything when they're working like adults may do. And the biggest one, the kids were paid less. Some causes and effects for child labor. Causes, poverty. Families, they were poor and they needed more money to provide for their families, so they'd send their kids off to work. Labor shortages, the towns and communities, they needed more people to work, so the kids would go work, obviously. Need for cheap labor, the kids, they didn't really know and they couldn't do anything about the cheap labor, so they were an easy way to get work done for a small price. And then overpopulation, there was just a large amount of children that they really didn't know what to do with, so they just sent them off to work. Some effects, the children obviously face serious health problems, whether it be with the chemicals that we talked about earlier, or losing hands, arms, whatever it may be. There's also a negative impact on welfare. The mental health of the children took a beating on them. And then as the kids grew up to adults, since they were working, they didn't really have school, so they couldn't do anything once they grew up, which led to them having a hard time finding jobs. And then an obvious effect is the children were underpaid. Here's just a slide about some numbers. The most employed age group during the Industrial Revolution was kids 10 and under. The least employed were people 21 and over. 70% of all children that worked in agriculture. 1% of them worked in mining, and 31% of kids that worked made between $600 to $2,000 per year. And then here is our works cited page.